pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you all for coming out tonight on a bad night. Is anyone here recording the meeting with tape recorders, anything like that? All right. Besides the TV guy. If you look at the agenda, there's a couple new things. Reading of the entire agenda and public comment. Public comment will be something that is not on the agenda. It is not necessarily, we won't act on anything that was spoken of, but if you saw something good, if you had dealings with an employee, if you have a question or you'd like, hey, is there any way this could be on a future agenda, or something like that. And that's what that's intended for. I don't want to have long, 20-minute speeches or anything, but, and this is, again, it's covered in our procedures and policies that we voted on and was discussed at least 3 meetings in a row. They are on the website, and that layout is listed in there. So at 6:30 is call to order and the pledge. The approval of the minutes of January 13th, 2014. Will be followed by public comment. Then there are budget items within town charges on the green sheet. Discuss the Neshoba Regional Health Services. Discuss the interim town administrator. Discuss the special town meeting date and a time. Discuss goals for the CDBG grant application. A contract for senior central electrical work. And the last item would be, and this is a little change, selectmen's comments, reports, and requests for future agenda items. Future agenda items, that would be, this seems to be the appropriate place to, for selectmen to request, or any other department to request to be on the next meeting's agenda. So, having said all that, the first item would be approve the minutes. 1/13/2014.
I make a motion to approve the minutes from January 13th, 2014.
Second.
Mr.
Motion
Chair.
made and seconded. Any discussion, any issues?
I did see a
Yes.
few. On the third page, last paragraph, discuss cable commission license fees and AV equipment. This was in reference to Steve Castle speaking. He has thought about equipping the gym with cameras, and I don't believe it was the gym. I believe it was either the Kiva or the auditorium.
Yes. Yes, it was the auditorium for like town meetings and things like that.
Yeah. And on the next page, under discuss animal control agreement, there's a sentence that starts with, Mr. Bennett said that the mayor, I think it's the mayor, thought the contract was for 3 years, which is an issue we're gonna have to deal with. And that was it, that's all I found.
All right, other than those changes, anything else, anyone? All right, hearing none, seeing none. Julie?
Yes.
Doug?
Yes.
Diane?
Abstain.
Yes.
Ken? And yes. All right, now, jump into the waters. Public comment. In case you came in late, this would be if you have something, if you've interacted with a town employee department, there's a problem, issue that you would like perhaps to see on the agenda or ask a question. Since not anything that will probably be brought up is, if it's not on the agenda, we cannot deal with it. but it's something that could possibly be on a future agenda meeting. Or you may be directed, like, maybe it's more appropriate to go talk to the highway department, like, you know, if you said, hey, potholes, what can you guys do? Well, we can point you that direction. All right? Yes?
Two things. The first thing is that I want to give an update from the budget subcommittee, since it's not on the agenda. This board voted to end up having members from the advisory board go to the Narragansett Regional School District Budget Subcommittee. When we reviewed the overall, as far as the agreement for the town, it didn't specify how many members would be on there as voting members. What we found out was that Templeton is being limited to 2 voting members, the same as, and that's for the advisory board, the same as Phillipston advisory board. That's 1 selectman per each community, 1 school committee member from Phillipston, 2 members from Templeton. These are voting members, by the way. And like I said, 2 members from the Phillipston advisory board and 2 members from the Templeton. That was an ad hoc decision that was made that night. It penalizes Templeton in the fact that we pay 3 times as much, and I just wanted to let you know that fact. Maybe that's something that should be looked at when we end up getting into the regional school agreement at some point in the future. I don't know when that will be, but that's something that I think that's we should end up having a little more say in the budget, especially when we have the impact to our budget at that particular rate. The other thing is that just as you do, I get the Beacon, and I want to point out that there was 3 articles that caught my eye. And why did they catch my eye? Because there was grants and help for water and sewage enterprise, which I think those 2 enterprises should end up looking at. And the other 2, because of our budget crisis, another 2 would be to look at the MMEG website, because they have grants for energy as well as the DOER. Both of those have grant opportunities for energy savings, which I think would probably end up helping you. Just so that people understand why there's so much light in these rooms, since our town coordinator has left. Prior to his leaving, he had a company come in. You don't see any bugs anymore, and he put in fluorescents that are more energy saving. I think that's the right thing, because that was a cost that we incur. So I encourage the selectmen to look at that. And as we had said in the advisory board is making the recommendation, maybe we should look at an intern from the college to look at these grants for cost savings. Whether it's a couple thousand or 10,000, it's going to help us in the budget in the future. That's it.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Mike.
I was with Will at the subcommittee meeting. I had the same comment about Will about the proportional representation that the town of Templeton doesn't get. But my other comment is basically around the budget crisis we find ourselves in. I find myself really disappointed kind of in the actions that the board's taken, the select board's taken. I don't feel that there is a good plan. I feel like we're waiting to see what we've got for free cash coming up. And I think there's a problem with that. I think if we feel that we're going to be able to fund this budget problem with free cash and stabilization, and maybe pray that we get an override, I think we got a problem. And I think we should be planning now. I think we should be making cut recommendations now, today, because next year we're going to have that $505,000 deficit on us again. Unless we get a $500,000 override, which we're never going to get, we're going to have to make cuts next year. And I think we're fooling ourselves if we're not making cuts now. The longer we wait, the worse it gets. We're going to reach a point where we have to shut the town down to make up the difference. And I just feel there hasn't been a lot of action. I don't think I at least haven't heard a plan, a real plan from anybody up here. And I think people of the town deserve to hear a plan. And that's what I got.
Unfortunately, well, if you were here on the meeting with, it was Friday night on the 13th, we were given 3 options. We were given 3 options, and and use a combination of those options. One was to use free cash, one was strictly budget cuts, one was an override, or use a combination of that. And we can't look at the budget and cuts. We could ask for an override, but as far as free cash going to a special town meeting, if we don't know that number, that's not an option we can give. I mean, what do you do? Ask people to say vote for free cash?
But somewhat,
yeah.
somewhat is, I mean, right, because, I mean, just taking a wild guess, right? You know, we could say we're gonna have 300,000 in free cash and stabilization. I mean, we could make some type of assumptions, right? And we could say we still have to make $200,000 somewhere, so we're either gonna go for an override or cuts.
Okay.
You know, and next year, we're still gonna be looking for $500,000. So I still think, you know, I'm sorry, I think we're kind of living in a fantasy here. You know, this town is living way beyond its means, and it has to cut back. This government has to cut back. We're gonna stay within those means, and we're not doing it.
Okay. Thank you. Yes.
I was going to say something very similar to the previous speaker, and I was wondering when there will be a plan of how to address this. And I know something was said on the 13th, and there is talk about a special town meeting. And I don't know if the next agenda item, the budget items within the town charges, is relating to this or not. But we've known for several months, I believe now, that it was $505,000. I've been looking at the advisory board's agendas online, and I haven't seen the advisory board addressing that issue. I might have missed it, and I'm not in the connection with all of what is being discussed at what meetings, but from a citizen standpoint, I haven't seen much in the paper, other than, as you said, Jeff, 3 options. You either do an override or cut the services, or you use the free cash. And everyone talks about how the free cash is a bad option, so waiting to see exactly how much we have is probably not the best solution there. And knowing what we know now, there have to at least be some recommendations that we can be acting upon. And it seems like the longer we wait, the worse the problem gets, or the less time we have to react. And the last thing that I would like to say is, if I remember correctly, on the override vote that happened, there was a portion of money, I don't know if it was $60,000 or whatnot, that reinstated some employees' hours. And I think that's wonderful. But now, is it time to take that back off of the table and go back to where we were before September, to at least put that $60,000 back into the town budget? And I almost assumed that that would have been the very first thing, because if that was just thrown back to the town departments in September or whenever the override was, it seemed like that would have been the least hurtful method to at least put a small amount of a dent into that deficit.
Okay, thank you. And so we don't get into stretched out. Again, this experiment is not to, you know, end up in a 2-hour period of comment without getting to the business at hand. All right, the next is budget items on town charges, the green sheet, which is, if you go to, if you've gone to pre-town meeting or town meeting, you usually see something like this. And the columns generally, the shaded ones are generally green, hence the green sheet. Not exactly sure how that came about or why, but I put this on here more of an informational discussion, a question, and a thing to consider as we move forward. It's a better plan for a budget. And the item, one item in particular is the Worcester County retirement expense. We don't have a choice in it. We have to pay it. I think last year's was $460 some odd thousand. There was a meeting of the Worcester County retirement system of all the towns, where mainly administrators, town administrators, town coordinator, treasurers went. And they got the great news. This year, Templeton's for fiscal 15 will be going up by $85,000. And it's, I guess it's something that's been in the works, and they're actually doing it in 3 steps. And they've gone to a different system, Merriam, I believe. There is a small way to kind of offset the town of Templeton's budget by recalculating the share of that that is the light departments. It may only account for about maybe up to $20,000, but that would shift it to that enterprise fund rather than off the town's tax base. Either way you do it, that's the retirement is an expense that we must pay. And if you go back and look at annual town reports, it's always been on a separate article. Sometimes it's been put off till a special town meeting in the fall. I know one year it was put on at special town meeting, and they took the $400 and something thousand out of capital stabilization to pay. It's like you have a mandatory expense, but you're not budgeting for it because it's not included on this sheet. What is included in here is school committee salaries, MRPC, which is the Montecuccio Planning Commission, and it's a couple $1,000s. We plan on that, but we don't plan in our operating budget for this year, it's fiscal 15, $500,000. It's like we put that on a separate article, and what, the townspeople are gonna say, no, we'll vote that down? You have to pay it. It's a must expense. So to me, it should be figured in this. And instead of this budget, town operating charges reading $4,630,000, it should have that additional 400. It should be a $5 million operating budget, because that's what you have to pay. We have no choice. The same with back in, I believe it was 1964, when Monty Tech was created and Templeton decided it was going to join. Our assessment to belong to that school is $680,000, in that neighborhood or so. Again, if we're going to belong to Monty Tech, we have to pay that. That's not a choice. And to me, I believe it should be in the town operating budget, because it is a cost of running the town. You could say, well, it's education, but no, it's separate from the Narragansett School District assessment, which is divided into, it's really two parts. There's a foundation budget, a minimum requirement that the town has to pay. We have no choice. The state says, your share is, I think Templeton's is $3 million some change. You have to pay that. You have no choice in that. You can give more. Some communities do. They just, their minimum is $5 million. The wealth community, they give 8, they give 6. The town can give more. The school district can ask for more. And we all know how that works. But there's a minimum that the state says you have no choice. Now, perhaps it would get confusing if we put our minimum in town charges and then have a separate article for the additional assessment. I don't know. I don't know how people feel about that, the board. But I do know the retirement, the assessment to Monty Tech is things that we have to pay. It's not like town meeting can go, you know what, we're not going to appropriate that, we're not going to pay it. Well, sorry, but you have to pay it. So to me, it should be in the town charges. It should be a planned expense of the town. Why give the voters, which many years they just, they voted, no questions, because it's a cost to operate the town. And if the end line says it's $4,527,000, but you get another $400,000 on it, that's like giving you bad information. What, 3 articles, 4 articles later, that was the county retirement, 400-something thousand. Well, it's only 400,000. No, it's in addition to the $4.5 million that you just voted. So it's actually, you need $5 million to run the town. And I think that should be, added on here when we prepare it and present it to the people at town meeting. Because, we have school committee salaries, We have intergovernmental charges. We have cultural and recreation. Why don't we have the retirement expense? It's an expense. It doesn't go away. It's one of those forever bills. We have the insurance on here. I think when we do this and we prepare this, that it should be included in that, because I think it gives a false picture of, it's only $4.5 million. No, it's not. It's this much, this much, and this much more that we have to pay. It's not like we have a choice. And that would be, and when you look at, you go to the assessor, say how much of valuation, how much do we have to spend? How much of that do we have to spend? It's property tax, it's unrestricted state aid, it's local receipts, and state aid is local receipts is grants, including that stuff, and then there's certified free cash. That's your pile of money that you have on the table. Now you have to spend it. Enterprise funds is in a separate pile because that money has to go to support that entity. So, you don't want to include, I don't know why you want to include that in your budget when you can't use it. And that's my thought, and that's why I put it on here more as an informational thing, and to get the board's thoughts to think about this as we move forward. So when we do present the budget, and it's going to be a short couple months away, that they get a more realistic picture of what it's actually costing to run the town. To me, $4,500,000, and you've got to throw another $400,000 out there. Well, it's not $4.5 million; it's $5 million. That's the budget that you're voting on, because that's what you're going to spend. And we should not be taking that, chancing or waiting to take that out of free cash or some other source when you have the opportunity to plan for it and ask for that money right up front. Like I said, we have to pay it. We have no choice. So I think it should be included in the sheet. Why it hasn't in the past, I can't answer that. But unless, like I said, up until this point in time, I guess that's how it's always been done. So that's how it's happened. People here have spoken tonight. Hey, have a plan, do this, do that. We have to change. We're living, we've been spending more than we've been bringing in, and so we need to adjust the way we do things. And there's another topic on the agenda tonight that will hopefully we can go in a direction and save a little more. At least look at it and consider it and see if it's a savings. So I was not looking for any action. It was just, like I said, I think moving forward as we plan, it's something we should add to that sheet or that budget to get a realistic number to the people, so that they know the cost of running the town includes this and this.
I agree. This is a good idea, because if we're not looking at the total picture, it's very easy then to forget about something and over budget, which could well be a contributing factor to our current profit. I mean, if you're not seeing that $400,000 and now you look at revenue and, oh, hey, I got more money over there, you're not really seeing the whole bottom line. So I do agree that that's a good idea. We should include, all of our, fixed expenses that we have to pay in here.
Julie?
I agree that we should.
I see you.
Oh.
I'm talking.
Oh, okay, I agree that we should include the Worcester County Retirement and Monty Tech. As far as the Narragansett Regional Assessment, I think that needs to be kept separate.
I know it could
according to our
be
regional
like
agreement.
confusing, even though we
Yeah.
have no, we have no choice in part of the money. And I understand that. It's just, I just thought it was worth tossing out there to hear, because it's not a one-person committee board. It is ruled by a committee. But if you don't throw it out there for discussion, you don't hear the answer. Anyone? Yes.
Well, just looking over at the list of items that fall outside of generally of town charges, so would we be including all of them? Revolving funds, like debt servicing, firefighter EMS, abatements, Monty Tech?
Well, I think Monty Tech is
It's
like I
listed.
said,
It says an expenditure.
It's listed as an expense, but it's an expense that the town has to.
Right, that's what I mean, it's listed as
Yeah.
a separate expense, it's not part of the town charges, it's not part of the green sheets.
But that's,
So,
I
yeah.
question whether it should be separate or should be part,
Right.
since, we have to pay that. The revolving accounts, those aren't mandatory to have. I know there are specific reasons for them, and it makes things easy, and again, those have been voted, I think, generally as all, separate article, like 42, 43, 44, instead of just one article with the revolving accounts. Again, I think it's been like tradition or something, but again, this was to get a thought process going, to get a discussion and to work up towards a better budget picture and present it so that there's a clearer picture to the taxpayers. Because, again, I think, town charges and they see 4.5 and then, oh yeah, by the way, we gotta have this much, 500,000 and 600,000, you're over $1 million, another $1 million. So to me, this instead of saying 4,000,005, it should say 5,100,000, or whatever the exact figure is.
And why shouldn't debt be in there? I mean, we have to pay our debt. I mean, and that's a cost of running the town. We've chose to take on this debt. It ought to be plain and simple right out there for everybody to see.
So, any other selectmen have anything? Well,
It's nice to take and see this discussion happening, because we have had this same discussion on the advisory board about that particular item. In addition, I'd like to take and point out a couple others, because we have separate articles which, time and time again, the advisory board has said, why is this a separate article, especially when we have it on the green sheet? And that would be property reval and assessor mapping. It's on the sheet, but yet time and time again, year after year, it's a separate article. We totally agree that there should be some things on here from advisory that have not been. As far as the schools, I think those should be, we've talked about that, those should be separate because they come from outside areas into the community, so we can actually see that as separate expenditures, separate from the green sheet, because if you fold this green sheet in, it would end up burying those in, and you wouldn't see what those charges were coming from other areas outside the community, such as Monty Tech. But we do totally agree with you as far as the retirement. That's part of the expense. There is no way for us to get around it. It's always been a separate article. Don't understand it. We didn't understand it, and we are in total agreement that it should be on here, as long as, along with the reval and the mapping, so that we cut down in the amount of warrant articles, and it shows what we're really spending and for what.
In the past, last year, legal kind of combined a lot of the articles into like one bulk major line items. Why would you have thought legal would have suggested back then to move your retirement in as an acting expense of your green sheets? I mean, they review all the warrant articles, you'd think they'd suggest that suggestion to put it there. I mean, I think it's a great idea, but, it's something you would have thought legal might have picked up on too.
it depends, it may depend on how it was presented to legal from this end, because I think generally legal looks at what you ask them, There'll certainly be something to be looked into this week at the Massachusetts Municipal Association, which our town council will be there because he's a selectman in his town, so that may be a question to be asked without the taxpayers getting a bill. So,
And I do believe though there was some conversation around that the legal firm had more suggestions of how to consolidate more articles, to lower the number of articles, but felt that it was just going to be too much change at once or something, and they did make some, suggested that we start with those and then we'll do a few more the next year, a few more the next year.
because change is hard, and like I said, I know with the school, if we did our minimum required on here and then have another, be confusing. Maybe after, a few years, if it happens a couple times, people get used to it, and then they don't. But and I know, change is hard. We've always done it, this way. And you introduce something new, even though it makes it easier and it gives a clearer picture to them, the change is, everybody, people in general, they don't change, always, you question it, even though it makes it easier, simpler, and a clearer picture. Julie?
I know we had just the CPC articles, the community preservation articles, the attorney put them all into one, and that caused a huge uproar at town meeting. So it's gonna take education, it's gonna take, a lot of work to try to get people to understand why we're making these changes, why we're trying to consolidate. Okay, it's not to hide anything, it's to try to make town meeting flow smoothly and to have a more accurate accounting of which money goes where, and people can follow it. But that transition is gonna cause confusion. So, however much we take on at once, I think, I don't be up to the board.
Mr. Dennis?
There's a lot that could be said in reference to the comments you have made about, why take the time? The important point here is all your discussion that you have taken place in the last few minutes doesn't change that you only spend $1 once. It's not changing your cost at all, correct?
No, if it's in a different article, but I just think if it's...
It isn't solving that problem. It doesn't have to do with financial planning.
I just think if it's all on one sheet, it's a clearer picture.
Yeah.
I know you're still spending the 400, the retirement money, but if it's included in here rather than going down another line, I just think it makes it simpler.
Again, we can only spend $1 once.
Can you turn that up? I like that tune. And I always value your opinion.
Lots of times, well, let me point out a couple of things then. Sometime we had separate articles that emphasize something. And it gave people an opportunity to point out, for example, want to choose it, you have to pay it. The other thing that we're talking about, as you do the line items, people can say, hold. There's no hold on those, as you said, we have to pay. Sometimes when you simplify, you do away with some clarity. An example, for years we have an article that points out that the Board of Selectmen, there's a particular state law, and I don't remember the exact numbers, but gives the selectmen the power to borrow money in anticipation. And people decided to take it off for simplicity. But it was simply there, and it made everyone at town meeting aware that the Board of Selectmen has that ability to borrow money. And that was taken away with simplicity. Well, I think it was there for a real purpose, simply providing information to the general public. And it only took a minute, it cost a penny. Why not?
And I think...
We lost the clarity.
And some of those articles, they used to get, like, didn't seem like all the money articles were never always grouped the same. They would
See, I
be...
think you're gonna lose some clarity. I find nothing wrong with you doing it, I would really. So I think that you only spend $1 once. All this changes is gonna affect a $505,000 problem. And if you had a couple gentlemen talk about, doing financial planning, I think we should be talking about that and not, just my opinion.
Yes.
And I think too, one of the reasons that some of those items that we have to pay, which have is kind of a dangerous term because, we really don't have to do anything. There are consequences to not doing certain things, but most of the reason that we have these line items is someone could, in theory, say, well, I think that we should take, $1,000 from the Board of Health salary and use that to, and instead of having it at line 260, we should put it over here at the Highway Department 214. But the items that we have to pay, such as the ones that you mentioned, like retirement, we obviously can't take money from retirement to move it somewhere else. So it almost then becomes the separate discussion about which items in the operating budget, advisory board can recommend that we spend less on, the advisory board can't recommend that we spend less on retirement. I mean, they can by letting go of people and eventually we'll spend less, but in one year's particular budget, they don't have control over that. Whereas the vast majority, if not almost all of the other items in the green sheets, the advisory board does have some control as to recommending spending less there and more here. So that could be another reason why certain items were kept separate as well, to not confuse people.
It is not theory, though, it is fact. If you go down this line item by line item, people can ask for a hold
Right.
and can amend it and change that amount. That's the legislative bodies for that night or nights of town meeting. That's when they get to say, we can propose you spend $20,000 on something, and town meeting can amend it and say, we're only gonna do 10,000. And they vote, and that's what they vote, and that's what you have. Again, it was just thought. Yes?
For the meeting next Monday, could we discuss voting on a 5% budget cut for this fiscal year from all department heads?
That would be at the end of the
Oh, that's at the
thing.
end, okay.
Future agenda items, but
All right.
yes, it can be considered.
Okay.
All right, moving right along. The Neshoba Regional Associated Boards of Health. I came across this and I asked Jeff Ritter to look into that, to see if it was a possibility, to see if they were interested. And again, this is consideration of future spending, along with regionalization and consolidation, which is aimed at reducing the amount of money that we spend for the services that we provide. So when they were contacted, the email came back. Jeff Ritter sent an email to all of us, and in it he said he spoke with Ira Grossman, who was one of the health inspectors. He said Neshoba would be happy to develop a program tailored for Templeton, but he was not sure whether the service area would allow them to skip over towns in between them and us. It might require a decision by their board and might involve interpretation of state law. There was a link on the website which went, if you clicked on it, and it had sections, home health care, hospice, public health, environmental. They do inspection services, they do home nursing, they such as well construction, tanning application, sewage disposal work, construction permit, camping and trailer stuff, food permit, application, inspection, temporary food establishment, lot testing. They do a lot of things. And the touching is there was a map on there, and a lot of the communities that they do are Ashburnham and Leominster, Pepper Groton. They're all borders touch, except when it comes to Templeton. They were going to check. I think there may be some stipulation that for this, according to the email, was that since we didn't border an existing the existing towns in this regional, this health association, whether they could skip over or not. So again, I put this on there just to see, and then of course, Jeff didn't get to follow up on this. And this was an email that we contacted last week. So I put this on there to see if the board was interested in thinking, getting your opinions on something that we should further look into, to consider as strictly a budget thing, to see if we could cut or consolidate, services, get the same services. And there is mentioned in here that they do some things a la carte, like if you want a specific, like food inspection for licensure once a year. If you need that, there's a fee, and sometimes they reduce that fee versus if you have them do services like an on-call basis continually. It's moving forward with our budget and expenses and trying to get things done in a more cost-effective way, which also affects the forever bills, which is retirement and health insurance for retirees, which is not unique to Templeton. Those are bills that are all over the place. It's epidemic. It's talked about in December and the January issue of the Beacon that Mr. Spring commented on. It's just things that are just, and a lot of unfunded mandates and things that we have to pay for that, down the road, you have employees retire, those employees are replaced, so you're paying for the retired employee, and now you're paying into the system for the new employee, and the bill just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. The only way to get out of that is to have fewer employees in the system and more contract stuff. So, yes.
One thing that makes me nervous about the response that you received was the fact that that we would have to interpret Massachusetts general laws to when that has happened before, it has cost the town more money in legal fees with little gain or nothing gained. So I would be hesitant to engage. If this was something that we could just sign up for, they could tell us exactly how much it's going to cost. It's going to be this. These are the services we're going to provide, but it seems like at this stage they don't even know if they can do it. And I would, before we went further and asked them for them to contact their attorneys, that we make sure that they're not going to send us a bill to do that, because that's obviously been an issue that's been raised, and I don't think that we should try to speculate on the legality of being included as a non-contiguous community without, like doing the legal work ourselves. So that's what makes me nervous about that, because we've had several recent battles over mucky and murky interpretations of law, and I think that we should try to avoid that.
Well, certainly I would ask, them to make the determination whether they could in fact do it and not, have us pay for it. Again, I think it's worth looking at all of these options as we move forward to try to control cost. Yes, and then Tom, and then Phil.
Just looking at, and thank you for submitting your budget, not all departments have. Appreciate it. Last year, what was budgeted was $101,120. The request went up 23% to $128,451. We've got to do something. We have to look at other options. We cannot continue down this road. We had asked for a 2% reduction for budget requests, and this is a 23% increase. I do have one other question. I'm glad that you're here. There was a bill for landfill monitoring that came in for $3,975 from Mark Popham to do the landfill monitoring, and I was just wondering why that was outsourced.
Because that's, can I speak?
Yes, answer.
To answer a specific question about the monitoring,
Yeah.
it's always outsourced. A company he hires a company that does the monitoring, very cost effective, less than we've paid before. We've also cut monitoring from twice a year to once a year. And to go to your previous question, our budget has followed that 2%. The difference is the hours that we got back. That's basically what's reflected. Since 2012, our budget has been cut $36,000 from fiscal 2012. And that's changes such as the trash bid that was cut in half through our efforts, the monitoring of the landfill from twice a year to once a year through our efforts. We had to petition DEP for that, and they accepted that, and our monitoring account has reflected that. Hazardous waste collection, we went from 7,000 to this year's projected 2,800 for, we used to do it once a year, we do it twice a year through regional efforts with Gardner. So we do it twice a year at half the cost through our efforts. So if you really look at that budget, you'll see the changes that we've made that have really, they're every year. They're not just once a year. So looking at the budget this year is basically because you cut our hours 2 years ago. We're in our 3rd year. We got them back. We weren't told to not budget it. We were told initially to put in a 1.5 COLA and a step if we were entitled to. We haven't gotten a step since 2012, so we did that. And then we were told to take that out and then to resubmit a budget with 2%. And that's what we did. So if you're looking at, I don't know how you're looking at the numbers, because the numbers and what we're asked to provide change. We're in version 1.2 at this point. I'd like to speak to the Neshoba boards of health. I have some information that kind of clear this all up.
Okay. All right, Tom?
Yeah, I understand that you've looked into this with the Neshoba Regional Healthcare, and my question is, has anybody had any contact with the Board of Health? I mean, there is a Board of Health board. Has anybody contacted and had discussion with the Board of Health to see what their thoughts and issues were before you even moved on this?
No, I just wanted to contact them to see if we could even belong to it and to see what they could do. I didn't want, if you ask the Board of Health, hey, you interested in doing this? I don't even know if they can, and if the answer was like no, then okay, that's it, you just tear it up and throw it away.
But isn't that why you have different boards, so you could suggest to the Board of Health, this might be something you want to look into, and then report back to us?
You can, but again, this is considering a budget expense. And to have ideas in front of you, because if you want a plan, you need options. And I just thought that this was, again, just contacting them, one, to see if they can, and they said, they're unsure. And what they provide, and if they said no, then that's it. If they said yes, and okay, what are the services, what are the costs, and then I would think move forward on it. And that's why I asked them to, to just look at it, to ask them to see if, it's feasible, possible, whatever. And it has gone no farther than that because they're unsure if they could even service us because of the border issue. And it was not followed up on because the person doing it is no longer here. So, but yeah, if they said they could, and this and that, and then you could, move forward. But, there again, it's, try to have some options in place before, at least when I think of it, before I ask the question or bring it up, at least have, options. You say you don't want to make a change, well, what are you planning on going to? Well, I haven't got that, I just like to have, some things listed, and then move that way. That's why I just asked, because many communities use them quite effectively. Yes?
Thank you. I spoke to the executive director, Jim Graffiti. I'm saying his name incorrectly. You spoke to one of the health agents, Jim Garaffi. He's the executive director of Neshoba. We're too far out for them. We're not interested because we're too far out west. Also, they're a district. by state law, save your attorney looking into it, it would need Board of Health approval and town meeting approval, if you so saw that as a option. I do want to remind the board that, and the board has already voted on this, and we have an intermunicipal agreement, that we're already part of a public health network. And I'm just going to give you this for your review, because the executive summary of a community health assessment has just been released today, and that can give you some information as to health promotion and different things that are being worked on through the network. A lot of the things that you're mentioning is exactly what we're doing in the network.
I remember the nursing stuff was, if I.
Right now, we have public health nursing, we have a medical director provided through the network. We can't give a vaccine to anybody without standing orders, without signed standing orders from a medical director. We have that. We did stroke prevention education in all the communities. We have vaccine assistant. The nurse came up, helped us with the vaccine. We have ongoing communicable disease reporting and follow-up. Right now, we have environmental health backup. You don't have any backup. If I'm down or away, Diana has the training, but by job description, she's not supposed to leave the office. We have an approved position for assistant health agent, went through all the hoops, approved through personnel or selectman town meeting, but it's never been funded. She's an administrative assistant. She's basically indoors. She's done some backup, but she isn't by job description or by your pay allowed to really go out. We have backup. Beach testing and reporting was done through the network. This community health assessment, which by the way is available online, you have just a summary version. This allows us to go out and get grant funding. We've been very successful doing that already. We have syringe collection kiosks in our in front of our office. We are going to have we do medication take back already, but we're going to have a kiosk available at the police station and pickup available through grant funding through the network. Banding together with these 11 communities, contiguous by the way, helps the population base. 3 of the top health indicators across the network above the state average is obesity, substance abuse, and suicide. A lot of the health promotion then tries to identify these different health indicators and come up with different ways to help to work towards that. We're working on a healthy weight initiative. One of the things that I observed with the Baldwinville Road project was the sidewalk. Some folks didn't think the sidewalk was necessary. However, you have a sidewalk now that links Templeton, one of your villages, center, to Baldwinville. Have you watched people use it? I see all age groups using that sidewalk. The point there is, if you create safe access to the outdoors, safe communities, people are going to get out. When they get out, that means they exercise, that means they do all kinds of things. One of the things we're working on is a safe street survey. One of the areas that I'm looking at is Gilman Way. Here we have this basically gem of a play area, but there's no way safe really to walk there. So there's some things you can do at low cost, painting lines, creating bike lanes, things like that, that then encourage people to safely access these kinds of things. If you build in defaults to people's lives, they tend to use it. So by identifying, by doing a community health assessment, which by the way, now that we're in a network, it's going to be updated every 3 years automatically. There's a little chart here of the continuous, we have the western towns, you have your cities, and you have your eastern towns. Putting us together, we've been very successful in getting grants. We're applying for an intern to work and help us with this healthy weight initiative throughout the network. One of the things in environmental health and in boards of health, because we're constantly being asked to justify our existence, we don't get to do this kind of work, the health promotion kind of stuff that really pays dividends down the road long term. We're concentrated on, food inspections, septic inspections, housing, trying to deal with that type of workload. Going forward, you're talking about budget savings, expanding your capacity. You're already in that group. And the Neshoba is a district. By state law, it's a little bit different than this. Down the road, you want to get out of this, we can get out of it. That's how it's built. But in the meantime, we actually have a community action grant in for a mobile dental medical van that can go to different communities. And we also have in the prevention and wellness trust funding that the state put out. There's a grant application in there. We're partnering with the hospitals, all the human service folks out there, Monticello Opportunity Council, Luck Crisis Center. There's an opioid grant that's been given to the cities, but those programs then are available to folks in the other communities. And you have an elected Board of Health that is on top of this, and I encourage, if you have ideas, to please come talk. I'll research. You came up with this idea. I know Jim. I've been on boards with him. I can call him. I can ask him the questions. It's not going to cost the town, except my time to make these calls. So today, again, because we're too far out from here for him, they're not really interested. And it would need a Board of Health approval by state law. And that's been a change from the original law. When it was first came out, the district law was in the late 30s, I believe. It was set up for Neshoba, and they've since tweaked it. I'm here to answer any questions. And if you want to go to our website, by the way, which Diana maintains, I think you'll find a ton of information. We're constantly putting information there. She does a great job. Has a lot of information. So this full, if you're looking for something to read in your spare time, besides budget stuff,
I do have that download, I just haven't, that book, I just don't have, really haven't had the time to read it yet.
but if you have questions, because we can, I can. Yes.
I don't really have a question, but I can say that I completely appreciate being able to call your office and having you be there and answer the questions that I have for properties and for, I don't think that we always realize how the Board of Health affects so many people inside of a town. I think that, I'll say for me, even hearing you speak, I thought we had belonged to something, but I wasn't really sure what questions to ask. But it's a matter of public health and safety, which also affects the CERT team that I'm also involved in. So having something just ad hoc or on a per diem, it may cost us more down the road in people's livelihoods. So, thank you. It's definitely, it's a lot to read, but I can say I've always appreciated being able to call you and talk to you.
She mentioned emergency preparedness. We've been involved in a regional coalition for 10 years. We've received tons of funding. In fact, the town hasn't bought an office machine in our office during that period. You're about to, because that money is changing its focus. But for 10 years, you haven't bought a computer, fax machine, copy machine in our office. We partner with the LEPC, your emergency manager. We have satellite phone access that he's trained on. They have radio communication that's been funded through the coalition. This grant funding, which Will did mention, it's one thing to say, oh, let's go out for grant funding. But grants require effort and require things in return. It's not free money. You have to do the work that money gives you. So